Elderborn is a heavy metal slasher with brutal melee combat and Souls-like progression. It's first-person Dark Souls, isn't it? At least, that's the idea I had coming into it, and for most mechanics, it is very similar to that from the Souls games, but there's so much more depth to it. Chivalry 2-esque melee mechanics and Ultra Kill-like weapon comboing are two other parallels I would class this game to, considering its combat. Plus, with an interesting story and a rewarding and intuitive progression system, it's truly engaging through every part of your playthrough. But pushing all that aside, Elderborn is a game that starts you out as a warrior with the sword, and ends with you killing a celestial being with a lightsaber. Starting out the game, we are given a cutscene that just outlines what our purpose here is. Basically, there's a big calamity, but thankfully the tribe survived, and at the center of the destruction was a city that is literally called Your Mum. But Your Mum's army was way too strong for the tribes, enslaving them and such, until a warlord came and saved the tribes. His name was literally Anus. He came and scared the city's armies away, and so for years the elders would tell tales that the city held the secret to eternal youth, which obviously they want to get. So every generation, a champion is chosen in trial by combat to set out and explore the city. This is us. Now that the lorddom's over, we enter into a Skyrim-like dungeon with nothing but our sword and are shown the ropes. First, the game teaches us how to interact with items such as this lever, which is going to be our best friend throughout the game. This then opens a gate and we move towards a fountain, which is this game's version of a bonfire. Now you see where the Dark Souls stuff comes in? We then are taught how to dash, which I move past and is instantly killed by this booby trap. But moving on, we find our first enemy and get to practice heavy and light attacks, along with blocking. Noticing a fella standing awfully close to the edge here, we get to try out our kicking mechanic as well, which is personally my favourite mechanic. It can be used to knock enemies over ledges as shown, but also to stun and break armed enemies' defences, allowing for easy kills. Then, picking up this key lying on the ground, we retrace our steps and insert it into this door, and move on into the catacombs. We find a file resting on this pedestal that heals us to full. We get 3 max charges and we refill them by getting kills. Activating the next fountain, we then are taught how to level up our stats with souls we have collected. There are 3 main stats that we can upgrade: Might, Speed, and Resilience. Might affects the amount of damage our weapons and abilities deal. Speed increases our movement speed and attack speed, and Resilience simply increases our max HP. Along with these passive upgrades, there are 3 special abilities for each stat that you can unlock after upgrading to a certain level. For Might, there is Charge, which allows you to hold down the kick button for a charge attack. Then there's Rip and Tear, which lets you pull off the heads of enemy corpses to then throw at other enemies, which doesn't do a whole lot of damage, but it stuns them and it's a whole lot of fun. And finally there's Stomp, where you hold down the kick button in midair to drop down for an area damaging attack. For speed, there's Reflect Projectile, which lets us parry projectiles and throw them back at our enemies. Then there's Essence Hunter, which teleports the souls from enemies straight to you rather than having to walk over them to pick them up. And lastly, there's the Air Dash, which allows you to dash in the air as well as on the ground. Then for Resilience, there's Lick Your Wounds, which lets you rest and regenerate 50% of your health when you're low. Die Hard, which when you lose all your HP, it makes you invincible for a short time. Then last but not least, Barbaric Rage, which lets you hold down your heal button to move faster and gain lifesteal for a short time. The only problem with all of these upgrades is it just takes too damn long to earn all of them unless you spend quite a bit of time farming souls, which isn't easy in this game compared to the Dark Souls series. I mean, even beating the game and moving on to New Game Plus, I barely unlocked over half the levels I need. But moving on, in this menu there's also a little codec that explains the enemies, bits of lore we've picked up, the tutorial info, our weapon unlocks, and also has some challenges for each weapon to earn a few more souls, which is a nice touch. Going into the next room, we pull another lever and continue through the catacombs. We fight more enemies, block the archers and kick the shielded guys, and collect more souls until we reach another door which, you guessed it, we need to pull another lever. Pulling the lever opens the door, but next to us we notice a wall of purple rocks, and it says we need to find a heavier tool. Interesting. Entering the doorway, we move down the staircase and find lodged in the rocks here our very first weapon find, the Ancient Spear. What makes this different than our old blade is that instead of a simple block, we are given a parry ability, which allows us to follow it up with a counterattack, which just makes it infinitely better. And it also deals more damage the further away you are from your enemy. To just organize the weapons a little bit more, we'll create a tier list and add each weapon to it as we go. For the spear, I'll be putting it in A tier since it's one of my favorite weapons to use, and the animations for it is so sick. For the old blade, straight D tier. It's just outshined by every other weapon you unlock through the game, and there's really no point using it after the tutorial. And we might as well add the kick to the list as well. S tier, no more said. Carrying on with our newly found spear, we jump down into this water and are immediately jumped by these things called drowners. They're fairly easy to take out, and so we move on into this cave filled with lava and fight a bunch of lava scorpions, making sure to keep upgrading our stats as we go. Through the cave, we notice a little something to our right, and utilizing some janky movement tech, we jump over and collect another key. Inserting the key into the door up ahead, we enter into an open room with a new enemy type, the Mummy. The Mummy is one of my favourite enemies of the game just because of its interesting movesets, which allows for easy parrying, which is always fun to fight. But you can also just keep kicking it down and stun locking it, so now you know why I love the kick so much. After defeating the Mummy, we find another one of those purple rock walls with a hammer resting on it. This is our third weapon. Now the hammer is much bulkier and slower than the others, but this also means it's easier to hit multiple enemies, and it hits like a truck. A bonus is that when doing a heavy attack, you won't be interrupted. It hits hard, but it's just too slow to be viable in most situations. C tier. Continuing on, we once again run into another purple wall, and breaking it down, we enter a room with a giant lava ball rolling down. Real subtle, guys. Heading downstairs, we fight more scorpions and drowners, and pick up yet another key, which, you guessed it, opens another door. It's around this part of the game where the amount of enemies starts getting more apparent. After searching around, we pick up a blue key this time to open the blue door. This is getting real old now. But this leads us to another door, so we go back, find its keys, and move on. 3 enemies all with their backs turned. This is going to be the easiest kills of my life. Uh-oh. Now we gotta fight more scorpions, ugh. We trek on, breaking another hammer wall, and collect our 4th weapon, the sickles. These also have the ability to parry like the spear, while also allowing 70% of its damage to go through shielded enemies. And from this point onward, these are going to be my weapon of choice, so like the spear, A tier. Plus, the puller animation is so sick. Fighting our way through more enemies, we uncover another lever, which opens another door, and here's another fountain. But right next to us, there's another hammer wall, and admittedly how stale the progression of new areas is through levers locked to breakable walls, it does make it easy to know what to look for. Plus, breaking these walls is actually fun. But anyways, more enemies, another door, but this time we gotta pull 2 levers. Ooh. We enter into this bizarre looking area, and from here there's 3 areas we can go down. The one on the left leads to nothing but a bunch of extra enemies. On the right, there's a... didn't see the booby trap. On the right, it leads to more enemies as well. Let's hope that for the... oh, dang it again! Let's hope that the middle has more in store for us and... oh, what's this? More enemies guarding a locked door? I wonder if there's a key for it nearby. Luckily, there's a secret pathway to our right which we enter and drop down into a hole where we find a skull. I wonder if it'll come in handy. Down here we gotta pull a bunch of levers to get out, but it also spawns a shitload of enemies as well. But thankfully, the hammer comes in clutches for these hordes. Thank you, hammer. Moving along, we finally find that key and put it in its place and oh yay, another room with 3 different corridors. This time, however, we have to find 3 more skulls on top of the one we've already collected in order to complete these pedestals. So we fight a bit more, collect all the skulls, and complete it, which opens up into these narrow walkways which I get to fully utilize my kick with. Then, finally, we come across Anus's arena. Here we finally get to meet the man himself and ultimately destroy him. Although his moveset is very predictable and there's nothing really stand out about him, out of all the enemies we fought up to this point, this is actually a really cool fight. The difficulty from all the enemies has never come from them individually. The only trouble comes from the amount of them, but even at this point of the game you have more than enough tools for any situation. Janus really feels like a Souls game boss by having to time your attacks at the right time and him using your weaknesses against you. Especially with his 3rd stage. If you manage to get a nice parry in, it feels so good getting those couple of extra hits in. Eventually though, we're too much for him, and as we take him down and collect his greatsword as our 5th and final weapon, we enter into the city of Yurmum. Boom, chapter 1 down. Now up until this point it's been much of the same with fighting enemies to then open doors and repeat, but from this point onwards, the game and story gets a lot more interesting. Stay put. Opening up to the city, we approach one of our new fountains and another door, but all of these doors need 2 keys to open this time. Yay! We look around and find 3 towers surrounding us, and in between all of them is this pyramid that we can rotate. I wonder if they're connected. Now, to save us a ton of time since this place is just a giant area with tons of shit to explore, our main goal is to simply find these 3 generators and activate them by hitting them. But this will then link them with the towers, which we head up to the top and kill the priest for each of them to then collect their keys. Unfortunately, my dumbass didn't even understand what to do with these generators, so I just ran around for over an hour until I eventually looked up a guide. Classic. But this area of the game is actually really cool. There are a bunch of new enemies such as the assassin who can turn invisible, the fire starter that throws molotov at you and is actually really freaking annoying, enemies with even bigger shields which also are annoying, and ones with little guns which is super annoying. I'm noticing a pattern. But scattered around the city we can also find new weapons that are similar to the ones already in our arsenal, but are mostly just a direct upgrade. Since we haven't put Anus's sword on the tier list yet, I think it sits at a nice B tier. Like the hammer, it's slow but it hits harder, and its heavy attack is so sick the way it reaches out. For the new weapons, in the slot of the old blade we have the ceramic kofish, which lowers the reset time of our passive skills such as charge and die hard with each attack, and it can parry, so that makes it infinitely better than the sword. C tier. For the spear, we now have a golden spear, which is basically the same as the ancient spear, but enemies now drop 25% more essence with each kill. Plus it looks cool. A tier. For the hammer, we now have the Skull Crush, which has the ability to deal 150% damage on a headshot. But like the hammer, it really only works best in crowds, and even with the extra damage, it isn't as good as the others. But it gets a boost over the hammer. B tier. Replacing the sickles, we have the bronze katars, which is probably the best weapon in the game. It can still parry of course, but each consecutive hit on a target gets 10% stronger each time, which is insane for single target damage. Especially with how fast it attacks, definitely S tier. And finally, instead of Anus's sword, we have the golden cleaver, which outputs the highest damage of all the other weapons. And once again, it's great at crowds, and its damage is just crazy. A tier. Now that we know what to do, we activate the first tower, in this case I did the lightning one, and start climbing to the top. Here we enter an arena, and in order to break the priest's shield, we must defeat all the enemies first. Now these aren't really difficult apart from how annoying they are and the sheer amount of them, and it doesn't help that the priest throws little erection balls. And it also doesn't help that the priest throws little electro balls at us. It's just a pain. But we finish them off, and taking down the priest is easy enough, so we collect his key and head towards the next tower, which holds the firestorm priest. This is much the same, except this time he has a laser attack, which is laughably easy to dodge, so we take him down and take his key with ease. For the final tower, yeah, this one was just as easy. Anyways, we now have all 3 keys, and as the sky turns dark, we head back down. After rotating the pyramid and connecting it all, we enter all 3 of the keys. It shines a bright light into the air and opens up beneath us. Here we find a glowing portal, and of course, we enter it. We now stand face to face with Anain and Amzarak. Yeah, it's just Ornstein and Smo from Dark Souls 1 all over again. I decide to target Anain first as she seems to be more aggressive. One thing I weirdly like about this boss is that they both attack simultaneously, whereas in other games, if there were 2 bosses in one fight, one would just stand back and watch. With the amount of weapons we have and how upgraded our stats are by now, it's really easy to dodge their attacks or just parry to get some cheap shots in. But after taking Anain down with our bronze katars, we then target Amzarak. Half the time you just stand still, and with our katars, we take him down easily, and once again enter into the glowing portal. Chapter 2 complete. Now I think it's time to go over the lore a little. Other than the cutscene at the beginning, there's been one after defeating Anus, and another after Anain and Amzarak. After defeating Anus, we explain that we can now feel his soul and power within us, and we can see his memories. We feel anger and distrust towards the elders, and now after defeating the duo, their souls are now conjoined to us as well, and bring some understanding. Our pilgrimage into the ancient city of your mum was never really for eternal life. The elders wanted us to regain the city for them so they can return, but something compels us forward. We do not care what comes of your mum. Destiny pushes us forward, and we can feel our true purpose lies ahead. Interesting. Waking up from our trip through the glowing portal, we enter into this massive area that looks almost like a spaceship. There's glowing crystals scattered about, seemingly rich in some sort of celestial power. We then climb up and enter some sort of sarcophagus. Activate it, we're injected with some kind of matter and fall unconscious. Waking up in a sandy arena, enemies begin spawning around us. Taking them down with ease, we move onwards into another place, repeating this process of taking down enemies and then progressing multiple more times. We then come across this area with almost alien-like cogs on the ground. After defeating more enemies, we then face the firestorm and lightning priests again, and with another swift fight, we are given the sarcophagus again, and this time waking up in the abyss. With nothing around us but this thing in front of us, we pick it up and are given the power mace. Pushing forward, we take down every enemy with ease. We're powerful, unstoppable. A higher being yells out for us. Destiny pushes us on. Coming across the priest once more, we take him out with one quick blow and head towards our true purpose. Placing our power mace into this otherworldly machine, we finally made it. We are Elderborn. Okay, pretty good. Overall, Elderborn is an extremely fun hack and slash adventure with super engaging melee combat and an equally interesting story. Now, it's clear throughout the game that it is very indie, and with its little jank here and there and repetitive gameplay, it's not perfect, but it is a really enjoyable experience from start to finish. And New Game Plus is something I don't usually do for any game, but for Elderborn, it's tempting. Check this game out, it's usually a couple bucks on sale, but even full price it's worth it if you're into these sort of things. Like and subscribe, and don't forget to watch my other videos.